Welcome to my kitchen. Good morning. Today is Yud Shvat. You're hearing it around Yud Shvat. Yud Shvat is exactly 68 years ago. 68 years ago. The Frierdiker Rebbe went up to Shemayim. 67 years ago, the Rebbe became Nasi. I want to read to you, in short, of course, what the Rebbe says we need to do on Yud Shvat. First of all, the Rebbe says that on this day we should set aside time to tell our family about the Frierdiker Rebbe. I have to tell you, I come from a family where my father always talked. He told stories. He told things. He got us involved. There isn't anything about him that I don't know. In some families, people don't talk. Talk to your children. Talk to your children. Tell them stories. Tell them about the Frierdiker Rebbe. But other stories also about you, about your grandfather, about your family, about what you come from. Talk to your children. Someone said to me once, Miriam, whenever you speak, you mention dem Taten or your father. Of course I do, because he's part of me. Because he talked all the time. Talk to your kids. Sit with them at dinner. Talk to them. They'll look like they don't listen. That's not your business. You talk. And so the Rebbe says that we need to talk to our children and to people about the Frierdiker Rebbe. Then during the course of the day, please remind everybody that it was the Frierdiker Rebbe that set up that incredible, unbelievable minhag of saying chitas, Chumash, Tehillim, and Tanya. The whole world does it today almost. Not everybody does Tanya, but it's an incredible thing because most of us can only do something in little teeny weeny. We can't do a lot. Chumash, Tehillim, and Tanya. Some people that they could do. And that was the Frierdiker Rebbe set that up. And then the Rebbe says that we should also go and speak to youth. So I have an incredible story for you about the Frierdiker Rebbe and youth. First of all, the Frierdiker Rebbe is the one that said, Amerika is nicht anders. America is no different. When they told him that in America you don't need God, he said, Amerika is nicht anders. For all of you out there, do you know that when Teda Vodas in Williamsburg was in trouble financially, it was the Frierdiker Rebbe that sent them a check of $3,000 exactly what they needed. Could you imagine? Then it was a lot of money. And you can't see it. $3,000 exactly to get them out of the hole. Did you also know that Rabbi Kaplan, who started Beis Yaakov, where I went to school, that when they started Beis Yaakov, it was Rabbi Chadakov of the Rebbe's office that helped them put it together? Weil Amerika nicht anders. The Frierdiker Rebbe worked on all levels of Yiddishkeit in America. But here I have an incredible story about when the Frierdiker Rebbe came in 1929, not when he came to move, when he came on the Bikur in 1929. He went to speak in a house, Mrs. Fagin Miller on 33rd Street in Philadelphia. She was well known for her charitable nature. So one Motzei Shabbos, he was in that house and people came to ask questions. There was a bunch of young boys. Remember that Rebbe said we should speak to young people on Yud Shvat. There's a bunch of young boys, let's say teenagers with their own agenda, that decided they would go to they heard the Lubavitcher Rebbe and everybody's making such a big deal of him. One of them said, forgive me, but I have it black on white or computer on computer. One of them said, he thinks he's God. They were very angry with him. They didn't understand teenagers then, teenagers now, they're all the same. I mean, we go through the same angst, yeah? So they decided to go, they piled into a car and they went to 33rd Street and they're going to tell this rabbi a thing or two. They came to the house was packed and there was a big line of people. But they came up to the door and they rang the bell or they banged on the door, and a man came. It was Reb Chatzah Fagin. It's so funny that you can just, it was Reb Chatzah Fagin, the Rebbe's, Rabbi Chadakov, the Rebbe's secretary. And he came to the door and he said, we need to know your question. What is it you want? We want to speak to the rabbi. Oh, I need to know your question. So they said, they couldn't say that they're going to tell him, what does he think he is, God? So they said they want to know, how do you keep such an ancient Judaism in such a modern country, 1929. And Reb Chatzah went inside, and I guess he must have told them, Rebbe, what this is. And the Rebbe asked for these kids to come in before all those other people that were in the room, that were in the house. The house was packed. They didn't understand why they were being asked, but they came in. When they walked up the steps, they said there was a magnificent-looking man standing at the top of the steps. Now, haven't any of you ever seen a picture of a Frierdiker Rebbe? Whew. And they went into the room, and he sat down, and he said to them, do you know why I'm asked you to come in first? I'll tell you. There's a man downstairs who his question is, his daughter's very sick. He needs a doctor. I don't know about doctors. I can give him a blessing, but I don't know what to tell him. Another man has problems in business. I'm not a businessman. Another man has all sorts of problems that I don't know about. Your question, boys, your question is for me, because your question has to do with education. I'm an educator. And then he said, do you know there are 613 mitzvahs in the Torah? And they call me the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Me, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he said his name. I can't do all 613. I'm having a hard time. These kids were sitting there like this. He's having a hard time. They came to tell him, who does he think he is, God? And here he tells them that he has a hard time with Torah mitzvahs like all the rest of us, even if I'm sure he was a tzaddik from the Tanya, yeah. He says, I try to do as much as I could every day. Every day I try to do as many mitzvahs as I could in the best way that I could do it. And every day I try to add a little more. That's all it's about. That's what it's all about. They sat there awed by the Rebbe. Awed. That's all it's about. And he said, if you do what I do, you'll be like the Lubavitcher Rebbe. You'll do the best you could. I do the best I could. Let's all do it. And then he asked them if they have to film. And if they didn't have to film, he would give them to film. They walked out. They said they stood on the porch of the house for 2 hours talking about this because they couldn't get their heads wrapped around what the Rebbe said to them. They can be the same as the Lubavitcher Rebbe if they do the best they could. Some of them became frommer, some maybe didn't, but everybody tried. So what's my message on this Yud Shvat? Let's do the same thing. It's hard for us to do 613 mitzvahs. You know, there's a lot less because the Beis HaMikdash, etc., etc. I think we're left with 200 and something. But even that is difficult. Let's do every day the best that we can. Let's do every day a teeny bit more. And together, I am sure, we will bring Mashiach. Thank you very much. Bevirchas Mashiach now. Seid gesund.